Welcome back to this week's episode of Be Bolder. We are once again joined by Alex Killian. Alex has been on the podcast before, but he's in a new role and he's thinking about some new things. And so we're excited to have him back and kind of talk to him a little bit about how investors are thinking about wellness initiatives in companies. So, Alex, for those who don't know, why don't you remind the masses what you do every day, your background?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I'm glad to be back on. So right since the last time I was on the podcast, I was in a corporate dev role, and I have since joined Endeavor. So we are a international network of, by, and for high growth scale entrepreneurs, and I can dive a little bit into that, but effectively what we do is support entrepreneurs who are scaling their business, usually post Series B, and we are trying to add fuel to the fire to just amplify potential exits with the idea that their wealth creation and first employees, investors' wealth creation is good for the communities in which they reside and help spur economic development. So very excited to be back working more directly with startups, and still working on some exciting things on the side as well, and looking at investments in a number of different opportunities. So definitely excited to talk about this topic. And before, just to bring everyone up to speed who didn't hear the previous podcast, I spent some time doing investments in real estate in Toronto, and then spent a good 2.5 years working with Lindsay at Launch New York on our investment funds. And so, a lot of varied experiences, and I think this is a really important topic. So excited to jump in.
Yeah. And Alex is being humble. He was really like the star of the show. He was always running around behind the scenes cleaning up my messes. He was great, and I'm always eternally grateful for you and the team. So let's kind of jump into it. You talked a little bit about Endeavor, but when Endeavor, for example, is looking at organizations, what are the things that Endeavor's thinking about, and understanding that this is not a pitch for Endeavor, right? But it kind of helps us set the stage for the rest of the discussion.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's a really cool model. It was started about 25 years ago in South America, under the auspices of, there wasn't a lot of entrepreneurship, or the concept of entrepreneurship in countries in Latin America was really nascent. And so the idea of both supporting, but then showing entrepreneurs and showing ecosystems that this is a path to immense wealth creation, and immense impact on communities, whether it be new jobs, like I said, new wealth, or supporting through new industries and new technology for consumers. And so what we are really focused on at Endeavor is a couple things. As I mentioned, the idea of working with high scale startups. So we really focus on companies that are at an inflection point. So they've proven product market fit, and they are really ready to just dump whatever resources are needed, be it scaling a sales team or scaling, devs, scaling new customers to just drive revenue and capture market as quickly as possible. So it's important that they have those qualities, and we really are selective. We're discerning with who becomes an Endeavor entrepreneur through the selection process, because the whole point is that companies and founders that are coming through and become selected to be Endeavor entrepreneurs are the top 1%, right? So I think it's actually 3 to 5% of companies end up being selected that start at the top of the funnel. And the value is that we have the same level of discernment with our mentors and the same level of discernment with our capital partners. And so bringing those groups together, be it with peers, mentors, or access to capital, really leverages the network effect, and allows for that scalability to just be that much stronger. Equal and probably more important is that those entrepreneurs have a give back mentality. So we want to work with founders who are in it to not only succeed themselves, but see others succeed. And that might be in the moment as they're growing their first business, or it might be after the fact when they have a liquidity event and now they're seeding new companies, or starting their next startup where they're going to have that same impact. So those are kind of the two things that we're most focused on. We skew towards tech, SaaS companies, enterprise, tech-enabled services. We have less of exposure in things like life sciences and climate tech, but we do have companies in our portfolio that are in those industries as well. They just are a lot harder to help, candidly. You
Yeah.
have to have a lot more technical and scientific minds to support those types of entrepreneurs. So we're building out that capacity as well.
Sure. So I love all of that. And I know you and I have talked in well, very recent past about some of the things that we think about doing together,
Mhm.
and investments we talk about doing together. And one of the things we talk about is like, are these folks the top 1% of the top 1%? And it sounds like Endeavor has a similar mindset, right? Like, this is the top
Absolutely.
3%. So how do you discern that? How are you thinking about that for the folks that are entrepreneurs that are out there that are looking to maybe join the
Yeah,
organization?
it's a great question, and there's a couple things, and and on some senses, there's just this feeling when you get around founders where you talk with them, and they are dynamic and thoughtful, inquisitive, constant learners, and you just kind of get that sense, right? Like, they're built different.
Mhm.
They eat, breathe, and sleep their startup, but they do it in a healthy way, right? Like, it's not an obsession in an unhealthy way, but they're just so engaged and fueled by what they're working on. Um, and so there is sometimes where it's just that feeling. But I would say more so kind of the more things that you can see are, they've shown that they can overcome adversity in their journey from founding. They have a passion or a mission that isn't simply, I want to create $1 billion business because money's cool. Yeah, it is, but there's a real problem that they felt a pain point, and they now feel like they have a solution that they can bring to the market, and it's going to help a lot of people. Um, and so, kind of just picking up on some of those indicators along the way, what was their journey from ideation to product to commercialization?
Mhm.
What obstacles have they overcome? How have they built their team? Are they attracting, talent that is at their level or exceeding their level? And I think all of those things point to a really successful entrepreneur who has the capabilities to be in that top 1%. Anytime you start to see friction kind of along the way, like, those are the signs of, like, me, it's not necessarily that that person can't become that, but maybe it's not this idea, or maybe it's not this business, or this time. Just because it's that friction just builds and builds, and over time it's hard to maintain you know success and maintain keeping on building the thing, because it just becomes overwhelming. And so the more frictionless it is, I think those are all indications that maybe you're working with somebody who's working on the thing that can be that top 1% and have a really good success. And they'll still fail, right? Like, I mean, that's the
Sure.
venture.
That's
But if you can start with somebody who's predisposed to being in that kind of top 1% mindset, I think the outcomes are better in the end.
Yeah. So I love that, the organization that you're with is thinking about, hey, how do you do this in a healthy
Mm.
way? So in addition to the things that you talked about there, what are some of the things that you are looking at and looking for when you're talking to founders? And this is you personally. What are you thinking about?
Yeah, it's a great question. So kind of the wellness holistically, I think is big. We've talked a lot about this. The concept of somebody who is either not in a good place as an individual, be it, physical, mental, financial, spiritual, however defined wellness. Um, Again, there's that friction. It's really hard to overcome and focus on being successful, being your best self in whatever role that is. If there's other things that are going to be dragging you down, you're going to be, that energy suck because
Mhm.
you're struggling with your, again, any one of those categories, and so many more. And so it's just kind of that screen of how do you start to pick up on the cues of somebody who maybe is struggling in one of those capacities. And it doesn't mean necessarily that that is a deal breaker, right? It's how can I then be helpful and get them in front of the right resources so that that can start to get taken care of the way it's supposed to, and free them up to be the best they can be in their business. And it's tough because we talk a lot about being the best that they can be in their business, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be like the Google or Facebook mentality, like we're going to give them free lunch and dinner so that they work 16 hours a day and never go home. They're living on campus. It's not what we want, but we want that when you are working in the business or on the business, you are in the best mental space, physical space that you can be, because you're making those right decisions and you're making less errors. And again, kind of that those errors can compound and suddenly things spiral out of control. And the root cause is not necessarily because there was something wrong with the businesses, because there was something wrong with the individual where they weren't taking care of themselves.
100%. I mean, when we think about investing, a lot of times, right, we think about it from a perspective of, let's talk about the team, right? It's the business. I mean, you can give an average business to an all-star team that's doing really well and is taking care of themselves, and they will turn it into an all-star business.
That's exactly right. It's exactly well, and how many times do we see like these companies, they pivot, right? Like the thing that they end up being successful in the long run is not the thing that they started with. And that's so true, especially at the seed stage. Like we're making an investment in the individual, not the idea. Yes, there's all the things about the idea that get us excited, and like we're not going to invest in a high scale puzzle company. And I say that a little tongue in cheek because there's a really successful puzzle company in Buffalo that's made a lot of money. I wish I invested in if I could have. But within reason, if it's a business that has a lot of opportunity, it's so much about the team. And that's why, kind of goes hand in hand here. I'm jumping around a little bit, but we talk a lot about like market opportunity, right? And you always hear it's got to be $1 billion market opportunity at a minimum, right? For this idea to be enticing for the venture world. And that's not because I think anybody expects you to capture a substantial amount. You're not going to be $1 billion revenue business because you capture that whole market. The reason why a big enough market is important is because we all know you're going to pivot. And there just needs to be enough room so that when the pivot happens, you're not instantly putting yourself into a corner. So little sidebar, but again, goes to the importance of at the early stage, right? It's about the founder. It's about his or hers or theirs, mental capacity, physical capacity, like the ability to be the best founder that they can be. And that's what we're investing in. Not always just the idea and the potential of their business model.
Right. So everybody loves a good war story or a good horror story, right? Obviously, without naming company names or anything like that, can you talk about maybe where you've seen something go, you knew something was dysfunctional with the team or the, founders or whatever the case might be, and, organization had to make a decision to not proceed with the business and investing in the business, or cease investing in the business. Any of those might work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there we ran into this, I don't want to say often when we were at Launch New York, but we saw enough deal flow, right? Like this came up. And there were absolutely examples, and I can think of a few, one particularly where we were looking at, we had actually already made had worked with this company, and we were looking at subsequent investments, and you really started to just have some of the red flags that something wasn't necessarily right. You just got this feeling there was a distraction, there was less time being spent on trying to propel and grow the business, more time being spent on kind of personal items, and it all just started to trigger that like spidey sense a little bit, like something's not right here. And it did ended up being kind of that situation where the founder was having financial issues, and the startup game is pretty ruthless when it comes to that. And so that focus was no longer on the business. It was on, how do I make sure I'm doing the things I need to be doing at my, personal life, and the business suffered and ended up, kind of going under because of that.
Mhm.
Um, and that's really hard because I think that of all of the things that we've talked about, uh, you know, and try and support entrepreneurs with, the financial piece is really the hardest, right? Because it's, I can give you and provide you with resources for mental health. I can, try and set you up to be at least carving out time for yourself, or giving you like tools like a Whoop band or something to be able to track your physical wellness and like make sure you're getting enough sleep and all of those things. And spirituality, again, there's resources out there. The financial piece is tough because it's, how do you take care of someone's financials other than giving them money, and oftentimes you're not in a position to do that.
Right.
So that's a harder one. Like I don't always have a good answer for that, but it happens, and it happens frequently. Now on the flip side, I think there's stories that in founders that we've worked with, and I think you'll quickly pick up on who it was, but we've seen just like immense amounts of adversity, right? Like things that could sink the startup before it ever even had a chance to be successful. And that founder was able to overcome it, and that founding team was able to overcome it time and time again. And it's like, again, we kind of go back to the 1%. Like if that's not an indication that by hell or high water they're going to make this thing successful, that's it's almost then doing a disservice if, if we're not
Right.
supporting founders, right? Because they've proven that they have what it takes to kind of overcome those things, and they did it in a way of a good support system, from their early investors, from the community. It takes a village in a lot of sense, the same way they say raising a kid. It takes a village to launch a startup. So you
It
see both
does.
sides of it.
It does. And I do know what company, I think, what company you're talking about there. But I mean, it's important to note that that company also did it in a healthy way. Like those people, like even down to the financial health of themselves, they made decisions to like move in with their family for a period of time so
Mhm.
that they didn't have the stresses and the burdens of trying to figure out how to pay a mortgage or
Right.
rent. So they, made sure that they were taking care of themselves. So they weren't creating additional distractions in their everyday life. Like it is hard enough to try to run a business or even run a business line within a company. Yes, you have some resources or whatever, but like you got a lot of pressure on you to try to like run
Absolutely.
certain things. And, if you're distracted with, hey, how do I pay my mortgage? Or, dealing with massive amounts of, personal mental health issues, physical health issues, all those things. You can't do it all, right? And I think that's, you can have it all if you take care of yourself and you take care of yourself very consistently. But uh that you have to be consistent about, because if you're consistently inconsistent, or if you're consistent at not taking care of yourself, that's going to have a set of outcomes too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a lot of things that I think early founders can look at to try and set themselves up in advance to be um putting guardrails almost, or checks in, right? Like I think you think about the preference, and it's not always the case, but the preference to have multiple founders on a startup team, right? Like
Mhm.
solo entrepreneurship is that much more challenging, because you don't have somebody that you're going through kind of the battlefields with. You don't have somebody that you can talk to and share those stressors and insecurities and concerns. You don't have somebody who can keep you in check, make sure you're taking care of yourself. We take a big responsibility, I think, as investors to do that. Not all investors are like that. There's a lot of people who just write checks and say, hey, hope this all works out. But I think things that founders can do early on, having open conversations with their significant others, right? Like here's the realities of what's going to happen, and are we comfortable taking on this risk, and being very open about those things early on are all important, so that 6-12 months down the road, when you're in the thick of raising a series A, and struggling to pay payroll or whatever, the things that happen time and time again for
Yep.
the founders, you already kind of set yourself up for success because you have those support systems in place, and you're not trying to scramble, with both the business and your personal life at the same time.
Amen. Amen. And look, does that happen sometimes? Yes, but do you have the systems in place to manage through it? That's, I think, the thing that people need to always keep in the back of their mind. So rounding it out, because I think this was super important for people to hear. Like, there are investors that actually care about like how you're thinking about yourself if you're a company and you're seeing,
right.
But and what you see sort of as, sometimes your spidey senses go up. I would say, can you give the listeners out there, one or two things that just are such red flags in terms of wellness or health in your seat as an investor that you would say, like, I just can't do it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think the first one, and it's sometimes hard as an investor to see it, but it kind of makes itself present in other ways. But the physical, like the energy component, right? Like your body, if you are pushing yourself too hard or carrying immense amount of stress, your body tells you.
Mm.
I know you've experienced this. I've experienced this in my life, and not as a founder, but like in different ways. And it's like sounds kind of out there, but like I think the universe does tell you, like, okay, you need to slow down. You need to get yourself in check. So that sometimes you don't realize it until someone tells you it. And so, like, again, you can kind of see that in someone's energy, how they're bringing themselves to the table every day, the level of excitement and engagement that they have as they're kind of talking with you. So I'm in the investor chair and I'm kind of going through whether it's diligence or you already had an investment, like update calls, like you can pick up on those things. And so that's a flag. It doesn't mean to fake it either, right? Like it's okay if you're feeling that. And it just is the universe, your body, whatever, telling you something's out of balance. And it's important that you get it back in balance and take care of yourself. And I think any investor is going to, even if they don't, we talk about other investors that maybe don't care about those things. I think any human is going to be receptive if you say, listen, I am struggling with this right now and I need support in this way, or I just need time or guidance on how do I deal with this issue that's not about my startup, it's about me as a human. I think majority of the people you interact with are going to be receptive to that, and now not only try and be supportive of you, but they're going to be that much more of a champion, a friend, and more engaged as an investor because you're being open and honest, and it's like an indication of what's to come after I make an investment, because it's so much of, again, about that relationship. And then I think on the other side, again, it's that team dynamic, right? So from the investor's perspective, if you are on a team, I'm probably going to want to meet all of those people, and it might just be your executive, or it might be all the way down to your junior dev person, and so those things tend to be pretty obvious when you start talking to other people in the team if something's going on with the leadership team where they're clearly being impacted by something out of balance in their life. And people pick up on that pretty quickly, and you'd be surprised on how receptive others are when you're working with them. So I think that's the other way. It's a bit of a red flag when you start to kind of get some of those mixed opinions, or like, hey, I really like working for X, Y, and Z, but man, can they be challenging? So like, okay, what do you mean by that? what is challenging? Like, what does that mean? Are they pushing you to just, do your best, or are they hard to work with, right? And you start to kind of peel back that onion and quickly realize, if I'm investing in the individual more so than I am investing in the idea, what does that say about the potential of this company if they're already kind of dealing with these things, and there's still so much more adversity to come. So,
and it's probably just going to get worse,
correct,
right? And sometimes people are unaware. They don't know that they're coming off that way. And sometimes people are very aware that they're coming off that way. And then, then that kind of brings us back to, is like, in terms of leadership for that organization, for example, are they really part of the top 1%?
Correct.
Right. Because if they can't lead their teams in an efficient, effective way without, being, call it, mentally or physically abusive on their team members, is that really the best of the best?
That's it. Exactly right. And it is really, again, like, we talked a little bit about this today on the podcast, but like, you know when you meet somebody, right, who just has it. And again, I don't I always preface this with, it is not something that I think everybody can have it, right?
Yeah.
The alignment of the right idea at the right time with the right passionate leader who's doing it. And I think everybody in the entire world can have that it thing. But when you meet somebody where those all of that is aligning, um, man, does it just knock your socks off? And it's like you get that sense of like, I want to go work for that individual.
Yeah.
Like screw this investing stuff. I want to go follow that person into battle. And so it's just really cool when you see that. And I think some of the people that I've encountered that are really successful in that are constantly they're constantly learning, and they're constantly pushing themselves to be better. And they have this kind of like servant leader mentality. I don't know nearly as much as a lot of people think that I know, or I fool myself into thinking. And so I'm going to go continuously try and learn and be better and figure out the best ways to work with my team, to work with my investors, to work with my employees, to work with, my customers. And there's always that I can do better, I can be better. And
Yes.
it's the journey, not the destination, all that jumbo mumbo, whatever, all the sayings, the cliches. But I think it's true. I think it's true. And so the people I've seen who are the best at that have that mentality of constantly learning, constantly trying to push themselves to be better individuals. And by doing so, you push the rest of your team to do the same.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, Alex, congratulations on your new role. Obviously, that's super exciting. And thank you so much for being here and sort of sharing how investors, not all, but some, think about, wellness and the person as a whole in terms of it being part of their investment criteria.
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll plug is if you're somehow just joining for this podcast and it's your first one, go back and listen to the other podcast that Lindsay and all the great guests that have come on have put out, and shout out to Danielle too, and behind the scenes, because I think throughout, right, a lot of the stuff that you've talked about on here is hitting on those things, right? Like these are the really important pieces to focus on. And if you do, and you just keep working on taking care of yourself, taking care of your teammates, good things happen.
Amen. Amen. So, well, thank you for that. Thank you for joining us. And for all of you out there, as always, thank you. And don't just be bold, be bolder.